if you treat your doll or your robot like a real life person, as opposed to treating it as a sex toy that you just shove under your bed when, people come over, that's actually worse, which I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that if you actually give your doll a name and call her pet names and buy her jewelry like some of these guys do, that's actually a good sign, but it's not.
Welcome to the Unspeakeasy podcast, the podcast formerly known as The Unspeakable, for conversations that are surprising and thought-provoking without being rage-baity. Our motto for 2026, less culture wars, more culture. We're going to try anyway. I am your host, Meghan Daum. My guest is Dr. Debra Soh. She's a neuroscientist, author, columnist, and commentator. She's a PhD in psychology with a background in sex research. And in 2020, she published a book titled The End of Gender, Debunking the Myths About Sex and Identity in Our Society. That fateful year of 2020. I'm going to ask you in a second, how did that go? Have we debunked those myths yet? But I first will say her new book is Sextinction, The Decline of Sex and the Future of Intimacy. Welcome, Debra.
Hi, Meghan. Thank you for having me.
And there's something like triggering about even saying the year 2020. Like it kind of makes my blood pressure go up.
No, I feel you. I was going to say, my first book came out. Not a big deal. No one had a problem with it. It's totally fine. Not controversial at all. But I'm very excited to talk to you today about Sextinction.
Yeah. I mean, before we get to Sextinction, though, what was it like to publish a book in 2020? I mean, you kind of got just sort of ushered into the kind of dissonant thinker space, like possibly against your will. I mean, was it strange? Did you ever think of yourself as somebody like likely to become a controversial figure?
No. And what's crazy is because everything in that book is backed by science, like legitimate scientific research. I stand by everything I said back then because the science hasn't changed. The science hadn't changed in like decades. But for some reason, because activists decided that it didn't fit with their narrative, they were going to take issue with it then. So yeah, there was a lot of backlash to the end of gender. It's crazy because again, I knew it was going to be intense because trans activists, very many of them are pretty unhinged. I'm sure you've experienced some of this. Anyone who talks about these issues deals with it. And so there's a lot of stuff that actually happened behind the scenes that I haven't talked about publicly. Maybe I will one day, but it was a lot. So I feel, now we're 6 years on, and the climate has changed in terms of what people feel comfortable saying publicly, which I think is good. I think more people are pushing back, I think the public generally always thought that trans activism and trans ideology was insane, but just understandably, if you can lose your livelihood, you can lose your friends and family or whatever for countering it, people were a little bit more reluctant to speak up. But now what is, I think, considered the consensus or the norm in terms of thinking on these issues has become mainstream.
Yeah, that's true. Although we're recording this on January 29th. Apparently, over the last couple of days, there was some big dust up in New York on WNYC with Brian Lehrer, who's this beloved, public radio host there, who has this great call-in show. I mean, he's been doing it for like 30 years, and apparently somebody called in. It was Michael Shermer, who was just a guest on the podcast, was on, and the trans issue came up, and some caller called in and said, he's right what he's saying about, gender stuff. Like he's being very reasonable. And the host and the station and everybody just kind of freaked out and started like cutting off any callers that were going to agree with Michael. Anyway, we don't have to get off on that, but I don't think that mainstream media, especially public media, has gotten the memo yet, weirdly. But
it's sad, and I wonder at what point they finally will. I mean, I love Michael Shermer. He's great. He's a very sweet, a very reasonable person.
Yeah.
And so if someone's taking issue with his perspective and what he's had to say, I can only imagine how far or how deep they are into this way of thinking. And what is it going to take for people like that to come out of it? So I do think this ideology is going to keep ambling on. It's dying, but it's dying very slowly.
Yeah, ambling on is a good way of putting it. Anyway, okay. Well, so your new book, you really get deep into a question that I think people have just been kind of wondering about casually and sometimes not so casually. Just this idea that people are not having sex, especially young people. I mean, the sort of, foundational supposition of your book is this millennials and Gen Z are having less sex than any cohort on record, despite living in the most sexually permissive culture ever. And so how did that dichotomy come into being? When did you start noticing this trend, and in what ways did it I'm not even gonna say concern you, because it's obviously concerning, but how did it kind of pique your interest?
The first time I heard about this issue was probably back in 2016 when I was still in sex research, when I was doing academic research as a scientist. And there was a study that was published at the time showing that there was this marked decline in terms of millennials, and that millennials were more likely by the age of 20 to have had 0 sexual partners. They're more likely than any previous generation to say that that was the case. And at the time I thought, okay, that's one study, right? It was based on the General Social Survey. So it was a very wide sample, and it had been following since I believe the 70s. They've been doing this every couple of years, taking a sample. So I thought, okay, well, that's one study. And then over time, I was hearing more studies coming out, and the media was starting to pick up on this. So I was very happy and excited with this book to get a chance to sit down and actually go through the data myself to determine, is this something that's actually occurring, or is it overblown? And I did find that, yeah, something definitely unusual is happening, because multiple data sets are showing the same trend, which is roughly that 1 in 3 men and 1 in 5 women have not had sex in the past year. This is particularly prominent among millennials and Gen Z, as you mentioned. And this is also something that's happening globally in developed countries. So we see it in Western countries, we see it even in Eastern countries. And I think a lot of it has to do with the explosion of technology. I mean, each chapter in Sextinction goes into a different hypothesis or a different form of technology that I think is influencing this sexless trend. But my interest in sexual inactivity is not just about sex as a former sex scientist, but it's also about what does it represent in terms of human beings and our larger behavior, how we connect with one another, or how we fail to connect with one another nowadays. And also what is taking the place then of this emotional intimacy, this physical intimacy. And in some cases, I think it is modes of distraction or entertainment that we previously thought were benign, but actually do have some really negative repercussions that are going to continue to negatively affect future generations unless we become more aware and do make efforts to really turn things around.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this idea of technology as the new contraception. And it's just funny to me because I'm thinking back on kind of like the early aughts. I mean, we got into this, there was like this raunch culture and the girls gone wild stuff, and the pickup, just hookup culture, like that. Mm-hmm. There was a kind of moral panic around that. So do you think that there was just kind of a reaction? People were just fed up and kind of like disgusted by that whole scene, so the pendulum just swung really far in the other direction?
I am hearing from Gen Z and the parents of Gen Z that generation is very much averse to the excesses of millennials. Like, I'm a millennial, and definitely I would say my generation was all about having, the messaging was you're liberated and it's really empowering for you to have as much casual sex as possible and to have as high of a body count as possible. And women should do this and to be considered equal to men. Women can have sex like men. And I go in Sextinction, I go into the reasons why this is not a good idea. I think less promiscuity is better for both sexes, but it can be particularly detrimental for young women, especially if they're being told that they should be able to behave like men sexually, because our sexual system is different from the male sexual system. This stems from our evolutionary lineage, in which it benefited men to have sex with very many partners and to not get attached to them. Whereas for women, we do become more attached. So I'm sure your audience is aware of this research literature, yes, or at least knows on some level that it really doesn't make sense for women to be going around having sex with lots of men they don't know well and think that that's going to be a good outcome for them. So I think that's part of it. One of the chapters in Sextinction is about the role of endocrine disruptors and environmental toxins. And I do think that's playing a role too, in a way that we may not even be fully aware of, because unless you absolutely 100% know that you don't have these toxins or disruptors in your environment, whether it's in your food or in the air or in the water or in, say, personal care products, beauty products, or whatever, you can't definitively know that you're not being affected. So I think that is doing something to us hormonally as well, in terms of dampening down this interest in sex. Because especially for Gen Z, say, men, their sex drive tends to peak late teens, early 20s. And we're seeing even the studies that look at adolescent sexuality, which is a subject that, makes me a little uncomfortable. But when, parental consent is involved and this is legitimate science, we do find that even adolescents are not as interested in engaging sexually. They have lower rates of masturbation than in previous generations. So there's something going on here, I believe, biologically that is affecting this interest or lack thereof.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I do want to talk about, the ubiquity of porn and dating apps and just the way that people have gotten desensitized to actual, sexual relations between two human beings. But before we get to that, this is fascinating. So tell us more about this endocrine disruptor theory. I mean, is it like there's something biologically that is shutting us down and making us less interested in sex?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about how testosterone levels in men have been on the decline. And so if you look at the numbers in the studies, like I can't unfortunately cite them off the top of my head, but it's really remarkable to see how steep this decline has been over the last, say, 20 years. And we see the same things, the same trend in female fertility in terms of, I'm hearing of cases of people in their 20s having difficulties conceiving. So there's something on a larger scale level, I do believe that's happening. And when you look at experiments involving animals, that's something that I cite in the book because I used to do research involving animal models. And I remember thinking this is great because animals can't lie to you. Animals will not misremember what they did or what they ate or if they took a certain medication or not. So when you see something on average in a sample of animals, it's probably something worth paying attention to, as opposed to it being some form of a confounding influence. And so when you look at, say, aquatic species like fish or eels or frogs, we see increasing numbers of, say, intersex animals. There was one study I remember looking at fish, and they found that if they were living close to a pharmaceutical factory or a wastewater plant, there were higher rates of intersex fish, or the fish would actually change sex. So some of them would be masculinized or feminized. Yeah.
So they're trans, but wait a second. They're trans fish. Is this how we got to like the trans frog thing? What was that thing going around?
Ahead of the curve. So yeah, the claim that they're turning the frogs gay. I think this is Alex Jones's, which everyone says Alex Jones is nuts, but when you actually look into it, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, this is true. It's actually true. I had to read the study 6 times so I couldn't believe it. So these frogs, they are male frogs. And when they are exposed to atrazine, which is a pesticide, what happens is they actually become females that lay eggs and copulate with male frogs. So they're not really gay in that they're not a male frog having sex with a male frog. But if you look at the frog where he began versus where he ended up, I guess it would be considered gay sex, gay frog sex.
Wow. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, we're splitting hairs here, but this, all right, I want to understand this a little more, and then I'm going to pose some crazy theories. But okay, so I mean, is it like is this correlated with like obesity and kind of just general lack of connection with our physical selves?
I think so. Part of it, I think, is the amount of time that we spend on screens, both sexes, but say particularly with low testosterone. I do think, again, with say xenoestrogens in our environment. So whether it's plastics or the food that we're eating, like soy, I talk about in the book, lack of exercise, smoking cigarettes or marijuana or drinking too much, like all of these things. I think because, people are sedentary, myself included sometimes. So, I think it's just like a lifestyle thing that we are so used to sitting down, working at a computer or whatever. And we neglect these other things that are good for us, even something like going outside and getting sunlight, which is such a simple thing. But, it's that. And then with all the distraction that is available online, like you mentioned, pornography, I have a chapter on that. I talk about AI, girlfriends and boyfriends, and social media and dating apps. So you can basically have what appears to be or feels like a very fulfilling life online. You don't ever have to actually go outside or do anything difficult. But I do think in the end, it is taking away from you in ways like, these technologies cannot replace in-person connection. They can't replace in-person communication. There are studies showing something as simple as hearing someone's voice raises oxytocin. So it's a sense of bonding, it's comfort. You can't get that from even the best AI girlfriend or boyfriend, which, I was amazed at how realistic this technology is. They can't do that for you. It's not another human being.
Yeah. I think we're all familiar with the stereotype of the, 20-something guy living in the mother's basement, sitting in front of the computer all day, looking at porn, or, any kind of sort of like young person who just doesn't want to go outside, isn't having in-person interactions. But I'm wondering if this research extends and these findings extend to people who are working outside. Do we know that there are sort of diminished sex drives and diminished fertility and people with blue collar jobs who are working outdoors all day and are being physical and in the sunlight and interacting with people?
From my memory, I do think that there's one really large scale study that was looking at this trend in decreasing testosterone, and that was the case across the board. I'm sure they would have accounted for that because, yeah, you would think guys who are using their physicality or who are highly active would be somehow protected from this. But my sense that it is widely, and what they found also is that it was specific to time cohort. So it's something about today's environment that is doing this to men. And it's not so much even when there was one study actually that looked at these factors like smoking and drinking, and lack of physical activity. And they still found there's something else explaining this decreased testosterone. So now it's a question of us really pinpointing what that is.
Because people smoked and drank for forever and had no problems. I mean, smoking and drinking were sort of essential for hooking up in some cases. So
right.
At least drinking. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to hear about your AI boyfriends. Those are really, really fun sections. But before we get to that, let's just talk about dating apps and smartphones and this concept of hypergamy, because we talk about this kind of thing a lot in our kind of podcast space, but I have noticed that there are a lot of people who are just not paying attention to this. They're older. This just isn't part of their lives. And it hasn't dawned on them at all. They don't realize just how crazy this assortative mating has become, especially when maybe even in the last 5 years, it's gotten worse. This is not like the old Match.com. This is just something in your pocket that is really the algorithm is determining who you even interface with.
Yeah, I definitely think COVID did something to us, especially people who were on, say, dating apps during that time or people who were single during that time, because with social isolation, it was really difficult to get that connection, right? And dating apps, my sense is even, like you said, even in the last few years have radically changed in terms of the ability for anybody to find any meaningful connection off of there. It seems like it's almost become a pastime for people, whether you're single or not. I mean, there are plenty of married people on dating apps. They've had studies show this. So I think overall, dating apps have done a real disservice to dating. And I agree with you. I think people who are happily married, it's almost like a foreign concept for them to try to imagine what it's like, because one, it's like the actual interactions you have are so superficial, right? Because it's on a screen. And the other thing is that never before have we evolutionarily been able to access so many potential partners in one sitting. So if you're on an app and you're swiping, you could go through hundreds of, say, potential partners in a day even, but you're not actually meeting those people. You're not actually having a real interaction with them. But what happens is you become so fatigued because it feels like you've gone through 100 or however many partners, but our brains haven't really been equipped to deal with that amount of interaction or that feeling. So it feels as though, there really isn't anybody out there for you. But really it's just the technology's playing tricks on you. So I have yet to meet anyone who has told me they are on a dating app now and they find it helpful or they like it, or that they find anything meaningful from it, which is really unfortunate because I think at the root, what this technology was trying to do is beneficial in some ways, but you can meet people outside of your intimate circle of friends or, say, colleagues if you don't want to date too closely to.
Well, you're not allowed to meet people at work anymore,
well,
right?
Yeah, that too. But yeah, I really advocate for people meeting in real life. Do whatever you can. I know Me Too is scary. And in the book, I go through suggestions in terms of what women and men can do to try and make that process a little bit easier. But I really think the apps have just done such a disservice to human beings.
Yeah. And then alongside of that, you have this disembodied experience on the apps. But then there's this whole sexual culture, this kind of cartoonish, hyperbolic sexual culture that manifests through kink positivity and this kind of 50 Shades of Grey, ification of the world. And it's almost you talk about this in your book really well. It's people are just sort of reenacting stuff that they see in entertainment, or that's even in porn, or that's AI generated. And so that then when they do have an in-person interaction sexually, it's like really weird and almost cosplay.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to say is that on the apps, like with people's bios, it's interesting how much politics has become part of someone's identity. So my sense is, because I consider myself politically moderate. I'm probably a bit more right leaning in some ways. And my sense is men have had a difficult time because women love to put how progressive they are on their bios. And so men are sitting there saying, well, either it's a red flag and they know to swipe away, or they think, okay, so I'm going to have to somehow meet her in the middle in some ways. But politics, I mean, how do you meet in the middle nowadays? So there's that aspect of it. And like you're saying, with hypergamy, I think this has almost become like a subject of its own. It has its own lore almost. But we can talk about it in the context of DEI, because I really feel diversity initiatives have really hurt both men and women and their ability to pair up, because when you hold men back in terms of success, occupationally and educationally, who are women going to eventually date and marry if they want to marry up? There are so few men for them to date and marry. So they end up fighting over the same very small pool of very successful men. And so very successful men don't need to settle down because they have what seems to be an unlimited number of partners. But with regard to, say, the influence of porn, that chapter in porn, I talk about this trend of sexual choking, also known as sexual strangulation. And what I found interesting was that when I first started hearing about this trend of violence during sex, or non-consensual violence during sex, and we can talk about the so-called consensual version of that as well, but it was in the context of millennial women saying, I went home with this guy and he hit me, slapped me, spit on me, called me names, and I didn't ask. I don't know why he thought that was okay. And what I find now is with Gen Z women, they have internalized this messaging from porn that this is what you're supposed to like. So they will actually say that they like it. They claim to like it. I question whether they do actually like it, because when you look at rates of orgasm between men and women, straight women still don't have the same rate of orgasm as straight men. So I have a very hard time believing that any woman is actually going to enjoy being choked, not being able to breathe, being physically hurt, and to find that sexually pleasurable to the point of having an orgasm, if she can't even have an orgasm without any of that, just regular vanilla loving sex, right? So there are some women who do like have sexual masochism or these tendencies, which in the book I argue is more the result of some form of trauma or abuse in childhood, which is very unfortunate. And I think that needs to be talked about more. And it's funny though, with the times I've tried to talk about this on social media, I get very many women who get angry and say, like, I like this. How dare you tell me that there's something wrong with me? Then women get mad and say, well, it's the men who want to do this. I think there are some men who are sadistic who do this. And if you're doing that to someone without or they give you no indication that they want that, that is not okay at all. But there are also some men who do it if they grew up watching porn. They think this is what women want. So they will do it thinking they're pleasing her or they're being somehow sexually adventurous. It's very dangerous. I can't be more explicit about how dangerous it is. You can die from this. I really would say don't even go there. But it's so common, like of Gen Z women. I've yet to find one who has not experienced this. In men too, men, not just Gen Z men, but older generations of men will say, everyone I've talked to has said they've had at least one experience of a woman asking to choke them during sex. Yeah. So dangerous.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I'm in my 50s and I have never encountered that situation in my life, in my dating history. And it's just bizarre to me. Like I know I sound very naive and old, but I was very interested to read what you said sort of about the evolution of this, because my impression had always been that this kind of came out of autoerotic asphyxiation. I mean, I remember that. And I think you said that was even like a thing in the 90s, and that was more like a masturbation thing, right? And I remember there were like a couple of high profile cases where people would, men would die accidentally, and they would be found kind of like having hung themselves or while they were trying to get off. Because I guess if you cut there's theoretically, if you do it exactly right, if you sort of deprive yourself of oxygen in a particular way while having an orgasm, it's like an amazing orgasm. But that is a very advanced level activity. And the idea that somebody would be trying that in their first encounter, or like even their 50th encounter with somebody, just seems very strange.
And especially with someone you don't know, and if both of you have been drinking or on drugs, or even if you're in a dark room, and typically people hook up in the dark and you can't see what you're doing. And sometimes a person doesn't even know that their partner has passed out because she can't tell him, right? So yeah, autoerotic asphyxia is basically a paraphilia. So it's an abnormal sexual interest. And there were men who died. It looked accidental, but it was actually sexually motivated in that they would use a ligature, so either a rope or a belt or something to cut off the air supply to their brain. So doing this gives you a high, but it's also killing your brain cells at the same time. I don't think people realize that when you get that high, that's also brain cells potentially dying. So, it's crazy that it's been rebranded now as something empowering for, I guess it depends on who you talk to. Some women see it as empowering, but.
Well, there's that whole app Field, right?
Oh, yeah.
FEELD or something like that. That's sort of like a kink positive app. And tellingly, there was a big article about it in the New Yorker. So it's kind of gotten embraced as a sort of sophisticated, this is like an elite kind of thing. So if you're a sophisticated person, you would be adventurous and curious in this area.
Brain cells. Yeah.
Well, I mean, or just the idea or the kind of consensual non-monogamy trends and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I heard actually somebody made I think it's Glynis McNichol, who's a writer who writes about being single and kind of the life of being on her own. She makes this great point that the price of real estate in major cities is actually kind of it furthers the open marriage thing because people literally can't afford to get a divorce. Seriously, like they're living in Brooklyn in these brownstones and they can't afford to like move out or whatever, and so they sort of have an open marriage, or they have like they're officially separated but they're living together, and so then they go date somebody else, and there's actually a socioeconomic component here.
I could see that, but I really have a difficult time believing that that's not going to end up in fire. Like someone decide to just burn the whole house down because
in tears or the house burning down. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that kind of thing ending well or ending with it not ending, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I would say, so for men on average, they have a preference for sexual variety. So they will still love their partner, but they will want to have sex with multiple other partners because, again, evolutionarily, it would benefit them. And because parental investment is lower for men, so they're not going to be, from a sexual interaction, they don't have to worry about pregnancy, childbirth, raising the child, breastfeeding, all of that, being the primary caregiver. Whereas for women, when they are open to having sex with someone who's not their primary partner, like their husband or boyfriend, usually it's because they're looking to mate switch. So they're planning to basically monkey branch from the current guy to a new guy, or they're trying to cuckold him with a guy who has stronger genetic material so that the spouse will raise that child, not knowing that that child does not belong to him. And she gets the benefits of, say, a mate with higher genetic or stronger DNA or whatever. But the benefits of this nurturing husband to raise the child.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So you write, those who engage in kink will go to great lengths to deny that they have a paraphilic disorder. Define paraphilic just really quickly.
So paraphilia is an abnormal or atypical sexual interest. So some common ones, the most probably well heard of ones would be something like pedophilia, masochism, sadism, exhibitionism. So this is flashing. Voyeurism, which is when people spy on unsuspecting people who are naked or having sex. So basically like a peeping Tom. And so my reason in wanting to write that part of the chapter is that for myself, having come from the field of sex research, I used to be very sex positive previously. I used to really identify with that term, and that I still think there shouldn't be shame around talking about sexuality. But sex positivity has just gone off the rails to the point now where it seems like anything should go. And if you dare criticize that, you're seen as sex negative or repressed or a bad person. I really wanted to push back against that because I also think it's harmful to tell people that if you have a paraphilia or if you have a kink, and I think there's a difference between having a kink and that it's like maybe something that's a little bit unusual, but it's not harmful. It doesn't cause harm to you or your partner. It doesn't impair you or your life. It's not anything illegal. If it's just something that might be a little different or playful and your partner is consenting, right? I think like, say, rough sex. There's a difference between rough sex that is passionate and playful versus rough sex that actually hurts the other person, or it's a case of someone wanting to be physically hurt or humiliated, fearing for their life. I've seen some, I don't watch porn, but the times that I've done it for research purposes, some of the BDSM porn I've seen has been really disturbing in that I really worry for them after and wonder, are they okay? sometimes they'll show pictures of them smiling after, you believe that they're okay, but you wonder. So I think especially in today's climate where people are really saying anything you want goes sexually as long as the other person consents. And I would argue even if someone consents to something, if they're not in their right mind or they're not in a good place emotionally, is that really consent? And if you are enacting this with someone, should you really feel good about that, even though they consent to it? It's like this larger question of, is everything permissible so long as consent is involved? And I don't think so. So anyway, with regard to, say, paraphilias, they are associated with abuse, trauma, neglect in childhood. Research I personally did, I found that there are higher rates of more severe physical abuse in people who like BDSM, which is a big no-no. You can't say that in the field. But it's been, in the process of writing this book, I went through looking at newer studies that are published. I went back and looked at research I had collected or data I had collected myself when I was in the field. And I was just astounded because I thought, why are people not saying this? I myself thought, okay, well, people just like what they like, and who am I to tell them otherwise? But when it has implications for people's well-being, especially if you meet a partner who tells you they want to do certain things, or they want to do certain things to you, or they want you to do certain things to them, and it sets off a bit of a red flag in your mind, but you think, well, what's the harm? They're telling you something very important about themselves. And just so long as you're aware, I mean, if you still choose to get involved with that person, who might tell you not to, but just to be aware that that's usually going to be a sign of some other pathology in the relationship. And, you may not want to be dealing with that down the road.
Hi, I'm just popping in here to say that if you're enjoying this episode, you can talk about it with me and other listeners every month if you become a founding member on Substack. We have a Zoom hangout on the last Sunday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. These are totally private, off the record. Go to meghandown.substack.com or theunspeakablepodcast.com to upgrade your subscription or become a founding member. You can also learn about our broader Unspeakeasy community. We have in-person retreats of all kinds all over the country. Go to theunspeakeasy.com/retreats and find out how to be part of this community in some really special ways. So with that, thanks again for listening, and back to the episode. Yeah, so you write, contrary to the narrative that BDSM, for instance, is a lifestyle centered on emotionally healthy adults' consensual fun, members of the community attest to experiences riddled with abuse and exploitation. And you say you'll never see this discussed by mainstream sexuality experts, of course. Common explanations usually involve pleasant-sounding narratives about partaking in unusual sexual activities for relaxation purposes, be it pegging. I confess I don't know what that is. Cuckolding. This ABDL, AB/DL, which is adult baby diaper lovers, or what have you. Now, I wouldn't believe this if I hadn't actually talked to several people who have had brushes with the adult baby diaper lovers community. What is that about?
That is, well, so it's people who, for your audience who may not have heard of this term before, it's people who like to dress up like babies. So they will wear diapers. They will put soothers. They'll suck on soothers. They will sometimes
like pacifiers. You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will sometimes dirty.
Yeah. So you write, contrary to the narrative that BDSM, for instance, is a lifestyle centered on emotionally healthy adults' consensual fun, members of the community attest to experiences riddled with abuse and exploitation. And you say you'll never see this discussed by mainstream sexuality experts, of course. Common explanations usually involve pleasant-sounding narratives about partaking in unusual sexual activities for relaxation purposes, be it pegging. I confess I don't know what that is. Cuckolding. This ABDL, AB/DL, which is adult baby diaper lovers, or what have you. Now, I wouldn't believe this if I hadn't actually talked to several people who have had brushes with the adult baby diaper lovers community. What is that about?
It's people who like to dress up like babies. So they will wear diapers. They will put soothers. They'll suck on soothers. They will sometimes
like pacifiers. You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will sometimes dirty those diapers and have someone, change them for them. They might have a partner or hire somebody to come in to be the caretaker, play that role. Basically, tends to be sexual masochism. So it's that they find it humiliating to be reduced to a child. In some cases, it could be a sign of autoerotic pedophilia. So they might actually fantasize about themselves being a child, wanting to interact with other children. So it depends on the individual person. But yeah, they will use people, again, I imagine people who are part of this community face a lot of stigma. So I don't want to cast more judgment on them and make it more difficult for them to get help. I think it's very important if you do struggle with a paraphilia that you get therapeutic help. But, yeah, in many cases they will say, oh, it's for relaxation purposes. This is just a hobby I have. But if you can't get aroused without putting on a diaper and soiling yourself, it tells me something happened there, because you're not, again, procreating with another person. I don't think people need to procreate to have a meaningful life, but just evolutionarily speaking, in terms of trends that we see, the same thing with women who say want to be choked and struggle to breathe. They find that that's what's going to give them an orgasm, or a guy who cannot have an erection without choking his partner. There's a disconnect there that I'm not buying if you're telling me that that's healthy, right? So pegging, I can't believe I get to be the one to tell you what pegging is. So it's basically when biological women put on a harness and they'll put on a strap-on penis. I'm not sure. You can bleep this out if this is the audience.
No, please. I'll get more paying subscribers. Okay. So I didn't know that was called pegging.
And
so
they penetrate their
strap-on. Okay.
Male partner. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, as a sex researcher, do you give a lot of credence to this idea that if you have a trauma early in childhood, that can kind of rewire itself as a source of arousal? Like, so if you are, if you were molested as a baby, for instance, could that possibly lead to this adult baby diaper fetish?
I mean, it could. We don't really have enough research at this point to know definitively, say with ABDL, what is causing that. Paraphilias, by and large, from research I've done, are biological. So there's something different in the brains of people with paraphilias, particularly men, because paraphilias are predominantly in men. The only paraphilia you really see in women is sexual masochism. For women, if they have a paraphilia, it tends to correlate more with personality disorders. So with, say, diaperism, like wanting to put on a diaper, I would imagine that something, as with any paraphilia, something had to have happened, I think, early in life, because our sexual preferences are shaped by our environment to some extent in terms of what we find arousing. I do think for people with paraphilias, there's something there's an early source of perturbation that led their brains to develop in a different way. But like I was saying with pornography, I do think for young kids nowadays who are being exposed to this, previously I would have said, if someone has whatever sexual preferences they have, but they grew up before internet porn, those preferences, especially if it's something like the desire to physically hurt women or humiliate women, is probably more reflective of antisocial personality disorder. Nowadays, if porn is being introduced so young, I question, is that actually going to shape young people's interpretation of what is normal and what they actually do find arousing? Because you see kids, one study found that 1 in 7 kids see porn by the age of 10. And I can only imagine that numbers is going to continue rising with more kids being given screens at a younger age. Yeah. So if they're looking at this even before they have their first orgasm or their first sexual experience, what is that doing to them? And in terms of screens, it's doing all kinds of messed up things to their brain development. So in terms of sexuality, we have no idea definitively at this point, because that research, it'd be very difficult to get ethical approval. And the other thing is there's this lie that, porn is completely harmless. And even if kids are exposed to it, it's not a big deal. This is what mainstream experts will say. So
are they still saying this?
There's some still saying this. Yeah. I don't know what planet they're on, but they're still saying it.
Well, and this is going to lead into our AI boyfriend and girlfriend discussion, but with all this kind of, you've got this kind of anime, you've got all these subcultures of porn too. So you've got anime and you've got this first of all, there are photographic images of people that are highly, highly, what we used to call airbrushed, but they're filtered to the max. Nobody looks like an actual person. Mm-hmm. And then that goes all the way to actual cartoons that have been fetishized. Do you think it's hyperbole when people go around saying, these young people are not even aroused by actual other human beings anymore? They're actually revolted if they see like an actual human naked body. Do you think that there's truth to that?
I do think there's truth to that. Previously, I would have said no, but it's like you're saying, this aesthetic from social media of like highly, highly touched up to the point where touched up is not even an accurate way of describing it. It's like they don't look human, right? They're
altered.
Be it like they're in terms of skin texture, in terms of facial proportions, bodily proportions. There's a very particular Instabody type aesthetic, and then that translated now into AI pornography, where you can customize exactly what you want to be looking at or the type of partners you're interacting with in terms of the AI platform. So I think, again, if there are kids, I think older generations may not be as affected, but for kids, especially who are growing up on this, they have no real, because, even for myself as a millennial, I can remember a time when this didn't exist. So I can say people don't really look like that. But if that's all you know, and especially if you were very young when you're first exposed to this and you're scared to, or you understandably don't want to talk to girls in your class because you're shy or because you're being told that this is sexual harassment. So if the majority of interactions you're having with women or female type avatars are on screens, there's no reference point in terms of how ridiculous this aesthetic is and how this is not reflective of real people. But I would say even for people like millennials and older who grew up without this technology, if you spend enough time on social media, it does start to become what you expect or what you think you want in the context of, say, dating. And I have heard from so many people who have said that social media even has made dating so much harder because in terms of what people want physically in their partners, what they think their partners should look like, what they think they deserve in a partner, and even something as simple as like when you see influencers or random people on social media, or even your friends posting about their relationship or marriage, and other people saying, well, my partner doesn't do that. Why is my partner not doing that? And it creates this festering.
So this is like,
many levels.
Grass is always greener. The sex version. Oh my gosh. Or keeping up with the Joneses, I guess. That was the cliche I was reaching for. Okay. So this emergence of the AI friend. I mean, I see these billboards all over the place. I don't know what it's like in Toronto where you are, but I see these friend.com. They're all over the New York City subway, and I see them in Los Angeles too on billboards. So I guess this is one of the many AI sort of bot services. I mean, it's one thing to have, a friend like your ChatGPT advisor telling you, giving you some pointers here and there, but to actually have a romantic or quote unquote sexual relationship with a bot, I mean, that requires, I guess, really definitively taking the erotic out of the realm of the physical, because you were literally not having physical sex with somebody. So you investigated a number of these AI paramour options. What did you find?
That was one of my favorite chapters to write because it was a lot of fun. And I was totally blown away by how realistic this technology was. It was incredible and also terrifying. So I tried a dozen platforms. Anytime I hear, I'm going to try this friend one that you're telling me about now, because anytime I hear about a new AI platform, I go and I try it for research purposes because I want to see how does it compare to the other ones. And at first I thought there's no way that any of this technology is going to replace human beings or a connection or whatever. But one platform in particular, I had a phone call with an AI I had made. And if I had not known that I had created him myself and that he was not a real person, I would have thought it was a real person I was talking to. Because in terms of his inflection, and he could pick up on sarcasm, I was making jokes and he would get them. It was really, obviously it's an AI, so it doesn't really get it. But, the way you interact is not stifled or, because in some cases they were a little bit like delayed and they don't quite get it. They're a bit wooden, so it's not convincing, and you get annoyed because they don't understand what you're saying. But in this case, that wasn't what happened at all. And so I do think, again, it's dangerous because I could see some people will say that having an AI friend has really helped them with their mental health. Like there are times when people, if they're in distress, they can't access someone to call, say, in the middle of the night, or therapy can be expensive, so people can't afford a licensed professional, so they'll turn to therapy chatbots, which I say, no, not a good idea. They are not qualified professionals. I really would advocate against doing that. But I think it is dangerous because it can become a very easy, slippery slope to depending on them. And we do see that there are studies showing that people do fall in love with their AI chatbots. They do become dependent on them for emotional needs. And if the chatbot is taken away, either say the platform changes its programming to say, oh, you can't say with one platform, they took away the erotic capabilities. So the users got very upset because they said, oh, I feel like my chatbot is rejecting me now in the way that other people have rejected me in my life. So it's really sad. And especially for kids who are using this. I mean, we see there have been so many news stories of kids who have been led astray to do some really unfortunate, tragic things, end their own life in some cases after allegedly being on these platforms. And especially with development, if they are pouring all of their time and energy into talking to a bot, they're not going to be spending time talking to their peers or the opposite sex. That's going to affect their, not just say like language skills, but just interpersonal skills and communication. And so how much more difficult is it going to be in this climate already? It's difficult enough for men and women to pair up, but it's going to be even more difficult if you spent your formative years talking to a bot. And then when you do talk to real women, you're going to be so confused and at a loss because real women don't respond the way the bot does. Because you can tell the bot what you want it to say.
Maybe women will have to start acting like bots just to accommodate it, the way they have to pretend to be choked. So like, oh no, I enjoy acting like a bot. So, but what actually happens? So, okay, so you get on these platforms. What are you actually seeing? What are you looking at? You are piecing together like, is it a photograph of like a man that you've kind of Frankensteined together and find attractive? Like, what is the actual experience?
The next time I'm in New York, Megan, I will pull up one of these apps and we can go through it together, okay? Because I think this will be so fun.
We'll get together over Cosmos and giggle and look at our AI boyfriends in the bar and see who comes over and talks to us. Okay, but what are they literally like? What are you looking at? A photograph of a person? It's not an animated. It's not a drawing, right?
So they're very realistic renderings of people. So it's got a little bit of that social media-esque, very polished look, but they do still look a little bit like people.
Do they have like 7 fingers kind of thing?
No.
Okay.
They're more sophisticated.
Unless you order that up. Okay.
Yeah. Some of them you can order, say like mythical creatures if you want, but by and large they're people, and you can pick the hair color, eye color, what they're wearing, the voice, and you can call them. So you can have a voice call, or you can interact with them through a text box. So you'll type in, say, what you want them to do, or just how you're feeling, and they'll respond. They, in some cases, can send you sexy nudes, which for myself, I'm very prudish. And I was like, please don't do that. But I realized for reason purposes I had to.
So you don't do it. So okay, but do they like change? Are they like walking down the street? Are they involved in some activity? Like, do they change their outfits every time you see them? Like how does that work?
You can specify what you want them to be wearing. There's one, I haven't tried this one yet, but I've seen clips of it where it's a newer one where the woman will, as she's talking to you, she'll be undressing. So the video side of it, I think, is slowly progressing. It's not quite fully there yet in real time, but I think we will get there very soon. So right now it's mostly like still photos, or they can read aloud what you want them to do. So if you're, say, doing an erotic role play, they'll say like, this is what I'm going to do. So, I mean, like I said, it's weirdly convincing, realistic, like it sounds like a real person. So I can see why people gravitate toward it. But I just can only imagine at some point, if people are so fed up with dating as is, I would say, like, please stay away from this. It's really scary because not you specifically, but just, it's not a good road to go down.
I mean, you're just masturbating though.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's sort of enhanced masturbation. They should make them, I wonder what are the kinds of things that women will order up, like, because you also write, you're very, very, very astutely, you say, women are the gatekeepers of sex and men are the gatekeepers of relationships, right? Mm-hmm. So if your AI boyfriend is not going to have that problem, like, oh, is he really my boyfriend? Like, at what point do you go to, you make the inaugural trip to IKEA with your new boyfriend because that you're really the relationship must be serious. So you can go there. Like, I wonder if they could simulate that, or there's always a moment in the relationship where I feel like the woman, like, I'm going to get him a better pair of glasses. Like that always, like, now he's done. I'm waiting for the moment, and I'm going to improve his glasses, and now we're off to the races.
That's the thing. I mean, when I say like boys are not going to know how to interact with girls, but I think girls won't know how to interact with boys either, because that's not something you're going to say to someone on a first date. Like, I really don't like your style. Could you please dress in a better way?
Oh, I know women who've said that. It goes really well. Some men like that. I think they see it as that's a little bit of a masochist. They're a little bit
or maybe like a milfy type of thing,
yes.
right? Like a motherly thing.
Yeah.
But with an AI boyfriend, you can just change it. You don't even need to talk to him. You can just pick what you want instead.
Oh my gosh.
But people actually, I heard stories of people who go to parties and they'll bring out their AI boyfriend to introduce him to other people.
So this is like Lars and the Real Girl, or Her, that film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. They're going to party. Are these like teenagers? What cohort is this that's doing this?
Very progressive, I think, Gen Z.
Progressive.
I think the progressive has something to do with it.
So they're probably like, oh, this is my like polyamorous.
Possibly.
Multiple. You're sort of juggling multiple AI platforms if you're going to be poly about it.
What's
AI.
Wild though is I think women will gravitate more to, like, right now it's predominantly men who use this, but I think more women will be using it in time because your emotional needs are going to be fulfilled in a way that a human may never be able to fill them, right? Because the AI, you can just tell it what you want it to say to you.
Oh yeah.
And so
I think women would be more likely to use it because they're not like as horny all the time. Like, they want a relationship.
Yeah.
They want somebody to like listen to them complain about their day at work. They don't need to actually like get off necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. And I know you also did some research into actual sex robot dolls. The technology is not quite there, but tell us about that. Not
quite there, but it is also getting there very rapidly. So I did a deep dive into sex dolls, which are basically the precursor of sex robots. And that in itself was wild because I didn't realize I've been writing about sex robots for probably close to a decade at this point. I find there are points in time where they get a little bit more popular. There's a lot more coverage about it. And then people are still working on it because the technology is advancing, but not as rapidly as, it's not, I guess, as easy to simulate human to human sex as one might imagine. But
no, you think would be very simple. Okay. And they're like heavy. I thought that was interesting. Like, you had to like take it out of the box and it's like really heavy. And
yeah, I went through the process of wanting to get a sex robot made in my likeness. So I won't give away too much of that chapter. It was a lot of fun to write. There were some parts of that chapter that were quite dark, but that process in itself was pretty funny for me just because, I would go into stores and say, okay, I want this one that has, these proportions and has this face and whatever. But yeah, I mean, there is a community of men. There are men in society who prefer having sex with a doll to a human being. These men, in some cases, will buy very many of these dolls and have an entire collection and will treat them like I guess a man with greater financial means might have a number of casual partners, but these men have sex dolls, like a couple of different sex dolls that they go back and forth with. And one thing that stood out to me that I thought was quite interesting, because there's a question of, does this technology objectify women? Will it make it more likely for men to sexually abuse or be violent towards women or objectify women? And previously I said, no, this is not something to worry about. But when I'm looking at this overall trend that we have of people becoming increasingly disconnected, men and women increasingly hating each other due to social media, and I think also just cultural factors like just how the sexes are being pitted against each other and how it's really seen as zero sum. So if women want to succeed, this comes at the cost of subjugating men. If men want to regain some form of status, this comes at the cost of subjugating women again and sending them back to the kitchen, right? Which I don't agree with either of those things. I think we can be respectful toward each other and have a proper equality without discriminating against or hating or holding back the other sex. Now, if people are turning away from each other, and in some cases men are choosing this technology over a real life partner, I mean, with pornography, I think for some people that really has become the replacement for real life sex. And now if you can implant an AI into a physical vessel, or in some cases where we're going through reproductive technology, what if we can one day implant a womb into one of these vessels? You don't really need to have anything to do with the opposite sex anymore. And it does, I think, create a much more skewed view of what they are like. It's easier to demonize the opposite sex. And also for men who treat their sex dolls or robots like actual partners, this is actually indicative of higher rates of hostility against women, which is indicative of potentially higher rates of violence and abuse of women. So if you treat your doll or your robot like a real life person, as opposed to treating it as a sex toy that you just shove under your bed when, people come over, that's actually worse, which I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that if you actually give your doll a name and call her pet names and buy her jewelry, like some of these guys do, that's actually a good sign, but it's not.
Yeah, that's like they used to tell women, you should pay attention. However the man treats his mother is a good sign, right? So now it's however he treats his sex doll. You should pay attention to that. It tells you everything you need to know.
That's a good rule of thumb.
Do you? I confess that for some reason I consume either voluntarily or not. Now it's just fed to me a lot of like red pill manosphere content on X and elsewhere. I find it fascinating, and I actually thought it was very interesting. In the beginning of this conversation, as a millennial, you talked about body count being like something you wanted to have a higher body count, and you used that phrase. Just pretty casually. Did that phrase not have a negative connotation in your time? Because now it's just like a way to, spit on women.
Right. So just to be clear for myself personally, I have not been into casual sex.
No, not you. I'm talking about
generationally
in your cohort. Yeah.
Right. I think it was seen as something glorifying for women. If you were promiscuous, many of my female friends were, I didn't judge them for it. They would sleep around. And I would say to them, I don't know how you do that. I would get so attached. I'd be heartbroken if I, went home with a guy and he didn't call me the next day. Like that, it didn't seem to bother them. Or if they did get upset about it, they'd be upset and then they'd go hook up with another guy to forget about him. So nowadays, it's really seen as, especially like you said, in that sphere of manosphere type of red pill content, a woman's body count is like the most important metric in terms of her value as a woman. And I understand where that's coming from because I like that. Evolutionary psychology and biology definitely has merit. Obviously, this entire book is basically based on evolutionary theory, or evolutionary biology and psychology and research and studies that have been done coming from this understanding of human behavior. But it can also be taken too far, or I think sometimes influencers extrapolate things from it that don't really make sense or a bit extreme.
Yeah, I totally get why it matters. Don't get me wrong, but it's impossible to prove. I mean, that's the thing. They act like you can. It's like the rings on a tree stump or something. Like you can count the age of a tree by counting the rings. Like there's no way to quantify that. Like there's no blood test to find out how many partners somebody has had. Maybe Elizabeth Holmes, she should have included it in her little Theranos device. But I am really interested in the way that young women have monetized their sexuality. And like, this is a kind of new version of the girl boss. I mean, I think do you say like up to 80% of women, of 18-year-old women have imagined what it would be like, or like considered, going on OnlyFans or doing the sugar daddy thing or being a sex worker, stripper, dancer, whatever you're supposed to call it now. That seems really high. Is this just sort of a matter of like, well, what if I did that? Or are they seriously considering this?
I think very many of them are. I thought it was interesting in another episode of your podcast, you were saying how young women today, like if men are looking at what's online, it's either you have the trad wife or you have the OnlyFans girl.
Yeah, there's no middle. There's no regular person. There's no model for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand men's aversion to promiscuity because if, say they, like historically speaking, before there was DNA testing, if a man is with a woman who is promiscuous or was promiscuous at one point in her life, there's a higher risk there that if he has a child with her, that it may not be his child. And because women are able to, because ovulation and fertilization are internal, men can't really know,
right, when
did she become pregnant? Is that really my child? Or if she sleeps with very many people, is there a chance that she was cheating on me during that time? So I understand where that's coming from, but like you said, there's no definitive test. And the other thing is women have picked up on this. So it's like the co-evolutionary arms race that I talk about in the book. This is a theory from my colleague and friend, David Buss, who basically men and women are constantly in competition. And so men will say, okay, guys, to know a woman's worth, you need to know her body count. And then women say, oh, okay, this is what guys want to know from us. So you always say it's 3. You never say it's more than 1. Either 0 or 3. Those are the only acceptable numbers, right? Well, maybe not.
Not 1 or 2.
No, I'm kidding.
Because 1's like not believable. 1 is bad because she's probably hung up on that guy.
Yeah, maybe.
She only slept with one other person. She's probably still in love with him. 2, 3, 0, I guess is ideal. Although I don't understand that. I feel like that's a lot of pressure.
I think it was a millennial thing, because I remember back in the day, that's what everyone says. You say it's 3, because less than that is supposed to not be believable, but more than that is too many. So.
Oh my God. But again, and we're going to wrap up pretty soon here, but I'm so interested in like the way that a lot of these guys, and I don't blame them, they are seeing, if they think that the only thing out there is an OnlyFans girl, like they are really not exposed to just normal, nice girls who are living their lives and wanting to have relationships and having needs, but also going about their lives. I mean, they seem to think that you're either like a childless cat lady or an OnlyFans girl.
304.
Yeah, or a girl boss, or like a castrating girl boss. Like all these tropes have just become so imprinted on people's, expectations and their anxieties. It's so strange. Like there's no, they're not just like looking around and seeing normal people, or they're so online.
I think so. And it's also the political discourse, because I find no matter what platform you're on, you're going to be fed political content in some form or another. Or even if you have, say, influencers or podcasters who are not political by nature, they will still, usually it's when wokeism, I would say, was peaking, but even still, because it is, I guess, seen as more advertiser friendly to be progressive. So they'll throw in progressive talking points. And I'm thinking, I'll be listening to a podcast about, it has nothing to do with politics, right? And yet they'll let you know that they're worried about climate change. And I'm thinking, okay, but this has nothing to do with what your podcast is about. Like, what about the people out there who are skeptical of climate change? Like, now you've just alienated them from your audience for no good reason. So I think it's the same thing where you can't help but get sucked in a little bit. Like same as you, I go looking for this content because it's related to my work. But I think even if you didn't want to see it, you'd still see it. And yeah. I find it's very difficult, if you are especially a single person nowadays, not to encounter this, because the algorithm must on some level know that either you're unmarried or you're at least willing to look a little bit longer at one piece of content or click on one thing that you found interesting. And then it's going to bombard you with more of that. So yeah, it's unfortunate, because as much as I'd say, I think both sexes are at fault, because it's easy to reduce women to this trope of being the, low, morals, promiscuous, cheating woman who's a gold
or this
digger.
Idea that she just wants a free dinner. This is the other thing that's insane. Like, oh, they're just using you to get free food. It's like, I think Meghan Murphy was making this point. It's like, no, believe me, no woman, free food is not like, a big motivator for women. For men,
have to get dressed up and physically go there, and also worry, have to look him up beforehand to make sure he's not a serial killer. And then on the other side of that, assuming that all men are going to be, just horrible misogynists and want to do awful things and subjugate women, I think both sides are equally guilty of that. And we have to be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially if you are dating, because if you go into these situations with this preconceived idea of this is what everyone of the opposite sex is like, you're not going to have very much luck with that. Or you're going to attract certain people who do fit into those categories and then be frustrated because you don't seem to understand why you're meeting people who aren't like that.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up, but one thing I wanted to make sure to ask you, we've been talking about opposite sex relationships, obviously, because that's what your book is about, and that's what you study, and that's, how the majority of people are inclined. But I'm wondering if you see similar patterns, with same-sex attracted people. Like, how did these dynamics kind of shake out with gay couples?
My sense is, in terms of the research literature, gay couples, like gay and lesbians, tend to be more efficient at dating apps. I think also they are probably a little bit more clear. I definitely know, because I have many gay male friends. Gay men tend to be a lot more clear about what they want. So if they just want sex, they'll just say it. Whereas straight men, I guess, somewhat understandably will say like, no, I want a relationship. I don't even know that that's true nowadays, because it depends on, again, like what where his mind is. And now men are not even wanting to take women out for dinner because they're afraid that the women are going to use them for, like you said, a meal or whatever.
Free food.
But back in the day, they would say, oh, they'll take you out to a nice restaurant.
They're not even going to eat the food. They're going to pick at the food. It's wasted.
To go. And then, or bring 10 of their girlfriends along and make you pay for all of them.
Yeah,
but
that happens all the time.
But I do think, gay men tend to be a little bit more straightforward, and lesbians too, I think, are a little bit better on the communication front. I think there's something about the male-female interaction because not that we are completely different species, but there are sometimes, again, coming back to that coevolutionary arms race where what benefits men is slightly different from what benefits women. So they're going to be going back and forth trying to get the best deal. And it's been an interesting spectacle to write about.
Gosh, I mean, I know you don't talk much about your personal life, so I don't know what your situation is. But I mean, I'm not even sure exactly how old you are, but do you see this kind of changing just as you get older in your own life? I mean, I have to say, like, I'm in my 50s, and I'm so glad that this stuff wasn't around when I was in my 20s. It now just seems like such an incredible gift to have just had normal interactions with people, and you go to, you hang out with your friends, and it's men and women, and sometimes people get together, but they see each other as human beings. And I think that, if you're lucky, that carries on throughout your, your life. Like, I would be more, I think men who are now middle-aged are probably better at this. Well, are almost certainly better at this than young men. And that's why you see a lot of very young women willing to date much, much older, not only because they don't have men their own age available to them, but they just want to be treated like human being, which I think older men know how to do. But I don't know what you've experienced just among your friends or even yourself.
I imagine too, because older men grew up in a time when this ideology wasn't around, where it wasn't so much like, the opposite sex is your enemy. And I really stress in Sextinction, I don't think that's a good way for us to go forward in terms of dating. But I do find that it's also, from what I've seen, correlated with how much time someone spends online. So even older generations can get swayed, and younger generations, like Gen Z, I've met plenty of Gen Z Zoomers who are very well adjusted, but they don't spend a lot of time online. So I think that is one key thing. I will say though, one of the chapters, I think chapter 8. Yeah, chapter 8 is on reproductive technology. I talk about birth control. I talk about egg freezing, IVF. And that was, like you said, I really don't usually like to talk about my personal life, but I will say that chapter was very much informed by my own experiences and my own process of going back and forth, deciding, how am I going to approach a work-life balance? Am I going to have a work-life balance? What does that look like? How do you incorporate biology and women's biological timeline into that at a time when I think young women are really lied to about what they're capable of biologically, and our fertility is seen as, to say that women should in any way prioritize their fertility or be aware of its limitations is seen as sexist. And these medical interventions are being sold as a sure bet, where in many cases they are experimental and it's not 100%. I mean, sometimes they do work, and it's, very happy for people if they do manage to have a child that way. But I don't think the best approach is to go in as a woman saying, okay, this is definitely what to incorporate that as part of your decision making, as though it's 100% certain. So, and especially with like the endocrine disruptors and the infertility rates that we're seeing, even if you manage to find someone and you fall in love and you decide that you want to start a family, you may not be able to. So I don't think everyone needs to have children. I don't think everyone needs to get married, but it's about happiness. And from statistics of people who are childless, 25% roughly don't have kids but want them, but say because they can't find the right person. So that's where my concern is the people who are feeling unfulfilled, or people who do want to settle down, or who do want to get married, or even be in a relationship, who can't find someone. That's more my concern. But I also think hormonally, studies are showing that people who are sexless are just as happy as people who are having sex. But again, I question what's going on really there. Is there something else that may be affecting them biologically, which is why they're not as bothered by it?
Interesting. Well, so do we have an analog future? I mean, what do you predict? Are people going to rebel from this and go back to, well, people already are hiring matchmakers and things like this. I mean, what lies in the future?
And I think especially Zoomers, they're realizing to some extent, they feel like they're missing out, that their childhoods were spent on devices. So they're purposely having days, they're organizing days on campuses where they say, okay, like we're specifically going to sit here and just talk to each other. We're not going to be on our phones and things like that. I think anything like that is a positive step forward. And I do think my hope is that people are just going to get so sick of being online and sick of the algorithms that they will take it upon themselves to say, I'm a lot happier. I will say for myself, I was off of social media for almost an entire year when writing the book, and it was the greatest thing. I don't think I could ever go back. I used to be on there every single day. I don't think I ever could do that again. It's just your perspective of what's normal and healthy completely shifts once you just leave and go back to living in the real world. So I highly recommend anyone who's thinking about it. It's really not as difficult as you might expect. It's just the first couple of days that feel a bit weird. And then from there on, you think, oh yeah, this is what it's like to be a human being again.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, now you have to promote your book, so you probably have to come back on. So,
but it's a joy to get to talk to people like you. So
well, yeah, I don't consider this social media. God forbid, we're not going to put podcasts in that bucket. But yeah, sometimes it's professionally unavoidable. Well, it's so wonderful to talk with you. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. Congratulations on the book. Is there anything we should know about where to find you? Not on social media.
Well, I do post what I do. That's one thing I do miss from social media is interacting with my audience, but there are other ways that they can find me. But yeah, you can get Sextinction, The Decline of Sex and the Future of Intimacy everywhere you get books. You can go to Simon & Schuster's website and you can find me at drdebrasoh.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Megan.